Now, developers could be banned from selling new build homes as leaseholds to prevent homeowners having to pay extortionate fees. MPs have described the situation in England and Wales as a scandal and the PPI of the house building industry.
I've seen many cases where often maybe the solicitor hasn't made them aware of this, or it's been small print, or frankly they've just been misled. I mean, I've seen an example just recently, and there's many of these, where someone was told that if they want to change their leasehold into a freehold, it won't cost them anything more than £2,000. When they actually looked at that in detail and asked for an offer, they were told it's £40,000. I've seen examples of people in their own houses, if they want to make a small alteration, they're told that they have to pay £1,500 to the freeholder. So these kinds of things, I think, are wrong. They're not acceptable.
Well, senior political correspondent Jason Farrell is at Westminster. The government appears to have woken up to this. How many people are affected, do we think?
Well, an increasing number, because it's gone up. It used to be around about 20% of houses that were sold had a leasehold or something like that. And then it's gone up over the last 20 years, and now it's over 40% of new houses that have been sold that have a leasehold on it. And it's not just flats, it's actually owned properties. So if you're living in a house, effectively you're paying for, and you might own that house, you're actually sort of paying for the land in which it's built on, and you pay this leasehold fee as an annual fee. And the problem is that this annual fee might start at a few £100s a year, but they have accelerator clauses on them. So Taylor Wimpey got into trouble last year with one that doubled after 10 years, and the 10-year span came up, and then people suddenly noticed that their leasehold premiums had gone up by double in the course of a year. So that originally caused a controversy, but there are worse. The Community Secretary, when I was speaking to him earlier, said he'd identified one where a house worth £200,000 had seen the value of would see the value go up from a few £100s to £10,000 over the course of a few decades. And the problem with that is not only is it a worry for the homeowner, but also it makes the property unsellable, because no one's going to buy a property when they know that it comes attached with this huge debt, if you like. Earlier we spoke to Lord Hope from the All Parliamentary Group on Housing. Here's what he had to say about leaseholds.
We do not need leases for houses. Freehold is the way that things have always worked in the past, and this is a relatively new scam. It is a scam. You get absolutely nothing in return for paying your ground rent every year, and it goes up and it goes up and it goes up. So we want to get rid of this, and I'm pleased that the government is getting around to this now.
The question is what happens now. It does seem as if the industry has already responded. So, for example, Taylor Wimpey, I spoke to earlier, said that they have now stopped selling leaseholds on properties from 2017. The question is what happens to people who've already got trapped into these systems, and there is talk of perhaps setting up an industry scheme so that people can be compensated. Taylor Wimpey have already set up a scheme worth £130 million to try to settle things with freeholders so that they don't charge such exorbitant rates on the people who own these properties.
OK, Jason, thanks very much. Well, Jason was just running through some of those. Let's just look at some of those figures in more detail. 21% of private housing in England is owned by leaseholders, with 30% of those properties being houses rather than flats. And as we've described, being a leaseholder gives you the legal right to occupy and own the property for a period agreed with the freeholder, and that's usually 99 to 999 years. Leaseholders have to pay their freeholders a fee, including service charges and ground rents, but these can increase by huge amounts each year, leaving some leasehold properties unsellable. Ministers plan to stop developers who can increase ground rent fees up to £10,000 a year on new build homes, and they want to stop these people by 2060. Well, the system's existed for a long time in England and Wales, particularly in the northwest of England. In 2015, 43% of new build properties in England and Wales were leaseholds. That's compared to 22% in 1996. Well, the chairman of the Society of Licensed Conveyancers, Simon Law, is in our Westminster studio. What grounds do you think people are going to have to say that they were possibly missold their properties?
It's very difficult to know all of them. This has been going on for a long time. the escalating rent clauses are never given to the buyer when they're in the site office, so it's very difficult by the time they've come to the legal professional who's going to advise them for that to be set out in full when they've already sort of made the conscious decision to buy that property.
But it is the responsibility of solicitors, is it not, to just explain what they're getting into, to make sure that they are aware of the steps that they are going down?
Oh yes, definitely, and all lawyers will report to their client and set out the ground rent provisions within the lease. But sometimes these ground rent provisions are very, very onerous in their nature and difficult even for lawyers to work out what the ground rent in future might be, even ones that are linked to recognise escalators like RPI.
I mean, the government's describing this as a scam and saying it's like PPI, but don't you think that the legal profession also has questions to ask itself about why it hasn't spelt out these dreadfully bad deals to buyers in the first place?
I think every good conveyancer will have spelt them out to their client. It generally forms part of the contract report to the client, and clients are asked to sign to confirm that they've understood them as well. But there's so many things. Some of these leases can go into 40 pages, and it's not just obviously the ground rent that's being reported to them. There will be all of the clauses of things that they can and can't do within that lease that will need to be reported to the client as well.
Interesting, I've had quite a few tweets on this. Derek tweeted in, I won't say the name of the company, but it is one of the big house builders, saying the sales brochure of this company didn't mention leasehold. He only knew when the deposit was paid and the legal work had started. Has now managed to convert to freehold, but with a massive price increase. How easy is it for those who might be stuck in one of these dreadful leasehold freehold situations to convert to freehold and buy it back?
The provision is there for people to buy the freehold. However, the cost of that will depend on their ground rent provision within the lease, because the Act itself provides that the landlord is compensated for some of the loss in the ground rent going forward. So whilst there are provisions there, we would like to see certainly the government give further legislation to bring that down so that these are manageable and that these properties could be sold very easily.
Because there isn't a set scale for what freehold should be, is there? As you say, it's up to the person selling it, and that's the person making the profit on the ground rent, and they don't want to lose that money, so they're going to say, actually, we need a couple of £100,000.
Yes, there is a statutory provision for a lease extension if you serve a Section 20 notice. However, that can take some time to go through the process and involve surveyors' fees. And generally, the leaseholder will have to pay the freeholder's surveyors' fees as well before that's determined as to whether or not they will go forward and purchase the freehold from the landlord.
Okay, the chairman of the Society of Licensed Conveyancers, Simon Law, thank you for joining us.